Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. We are in the darkness here at the Vaughn house. We lost our electricity. And so it just so happens that in our reading today we have a verse about light and darkness. And we're going to be looking at John chapter 7 and verse 12. And so Eden's going to read that for us, and then we'll see how that relates to our lives, besides just losing electricity. Go ahead, Eden.
Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life.
Okay, so Jesus here is making a proclamation about himself that he is the light of the world. And that is exactly what the world needed at the time that Christ came. The world was walking in darkness. And as we're finding out, as our electricity is out, that when a person is in darkness, it's, for one, a very dangerous state to be in, because you can't see where you're going. Everything's black, and you're more likely to run into things, be injured, and do harm to yourself. But there's also an uneasiness about being in the dark. Just not knowing where you're going or what's around you just brings an element of uneasiness. And then also darkness can bring fear, as most children are afraid of the dark. Darkness has that element to it, that it brings fear into people's hearts, because you don't know where you're going, you don't know what's around you, and it's very uneasy. And from a spiritual standpoint, darkness, from a spiritual sense, stems from ignorance. In other words, just not knowing something. And we use this terminology all the time. I was left in the dark about a particular thing. John chapter 12 and verse 35 sheds light on this. It also speaks of darkness as being in error, as far as saying things that are not true, not being in the truth, is not being in the lights, and darkness. Also, unbelief is seen as darkness. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4, we see that being the case. And then also sin is usually symbolized by darkness. John 3:19 through 20 that we did in a previous reading. And then Ephesians 5, Ephesians chapter 5 talks about the darkness and how we are children of light. Now, the earth was in darkness before God spoke. Remember, the earth was without form and was in darkness, and then God spoke. He said, let there be light, and there was light. And so God was the source of the light of the cosmos, of the universe. But we see the same thing happening with Jesus. The world once again was in darkness, not physical darkness, but spiritual darkness. And so you might think about that Genesis 1 account where where God spoke and there was light. Well, the world was full of spiritual darkness, and Jesus came and there was light. And you can reference Isaiah chapter 6 verses 1 through 3, kind of talks about that. But you have basically Jesus being like the sunrise. That's interesting in the Old Testament how everything faced east. The tabernacle faced east. The gate of the tabernacle faced east, as though everything was looking towards the east to the rising of the sun, which I firmly believe signified the coming of Christ, as the world would be in darkness, and as the sun rises and brings light to the world, so Christ came and brought light to the world through his teachings, through his example, through his miracles, and then ultimately by bringing us back into contact with God, who is the source of all light. And so we do receive the light of Christ when we receive the gospel message. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verses 4 through 6 talks about this. We become children of light as we take in that gospel message, Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 8. And then from that point on, we begin to walk in the light, as 1 John talks about in chapter 1 verses 5 through 7. And so the Christian's life becomes all about light. Even Christ spoke of his people as a light on a hill that cannot be hidden, as a lamp that you shouldn't put a shade over or try to put something over it to block the light, but you let that light shine. And that's what we ought to do. We live in a world that is full of darkness, full of sin, People don't understand what life is all about. And it's up to us who have the light of the knowledge of Jesus Christ and the light of the gospel to share that with others so that they can have light. And so just as tonight we are longing for light, we are longing for the electricity to come back on. There's a lot of people in the world who are in darkness that are longing for some light. They're looking for some light to be shed upon their own life. And Jesus Christ can bring that light. And he can bring life also into that person. And so let's shed the light. Let's let the light shine so that the whole world can shine with the glory of the Lord. Well, with that, I thank you guys for listening in today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.